Good afternoon, everyone, and I wish you a warm welcome to our session on insights on technology-supported teaching, learning, and teacher development in contexts of low resources and marginalisation. I'm Denise Whitelock. I'm your chair for this afternoon, and I'm the director of the Institute of Educational Technology at the Open University in the UK. We are well renowned for our research in educational technology, and I'm pleased to say that the speakers this afternoon are all from this prestigious institute. Let me tell you something about these wonderful ladies who are going to speak this afternoon and share their work with us. We have Kula Charit-Notus, who's a senior lecturer from the Institute of Educational Technology, and she's been working in the field for about 10 years. She currently leads work on a number of research projects, and they focus on the role and provision of digital education in resource-poor environments in context of forced displacement. What I think is interesting is that when she's going to talk about her work, she's going to talk about the methodologies and how she has contributed to her work to civil society organisations and policy organisations. She's convener of the Digital Education Special Interest Group of the British Educational Research Association and leads the OU's contribution to the UN-led Connected Learning and Crisis Consortium. So Kula's going to speak to us and present her research with refugees and displaced community. She's going to refer to her project with the English language teachers in refugee settings in Jordan and focusing on educators' perspectives on needs and support in the context of refugee tertiary education, something I'm sure we're all interested in and something that we feel we ought to be doing something about in this day and age. The research used the peer method, participatory ethnographic evaluation and research, and this is an innovative approach that provides a rapid and effective way of gaining an in-depth understanding of the social work of specific communities and groups. Following Kula, we have Saraswati Dawadi. She's a research associate in our institute, and she's got over 15 years experience in the field of education. And before working at the OU, she was a teacher educator at Tribhuvan University, Nepal, and a teacher trainer at Nepal English Language Association. And she's also working on a project that explores the use of mobile technology for teachers' professional learning in marginalised communities of Bangladesh. So we look forward to hearing from Saraswati. And our final speaker, final but last but not least, is Agnes Kukoshka-Hume. She's a professor of learning technology and communication learning at our institute. She leads the Learning Futures Research and Innovation Programme and the Innovating Pedagogy series of reports. Her work encompasses online distance education, mobile learning, and language learning, and she has well over 300 academic publications and papers. In Agnes's session, data collection, she'll be looking at her work from the Reem Malik project, which explored the experiences and perceptions of school children using technology and the English language for learning in several marginalised and hard-to-reach communities in Africa and Asia. Her data collection was led by local in-country academic partners and their teams, in collaboration with 8 different schools, and it involved teachers as well as parents. Outcomes have included teacher training and briefings for policymakers. Before I hand over to Agnes, I'd like to invite you all to use the chat with questions, which we will address because we've got a big question answer session at the end, but also to then ask questions during that session. So a warm welcome to you, our audience, and to you, our speakers. Over to you, Agnes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denise. I'm really happy to be able to kick off this session in which we will be sharing some insights on technology-supported teaching, learning, and teacher development. And we'll be referring to 3 major projects that we have been running. It's a great opportunity, I think, to bring these projects together, reflect on what we've found, ask ourselves some big questions around what is the role of technology in contexts of low resources and marginalisation. And as Denise has mentioned, we work at the Institute of Educational Technology, but also we work with colleagues in the Centre for the Study of Global Development. Tom Power represents that centre. Unfortunately, he can't be with us today, but we've all been involved in his project. So it's really, as I say, a great opportunity. In IET, we research the latest technologies, the cutting edge technologies, which are often inaccessible to people in more remote corners of the world, or they may not be affordable there, or it may just not be appropriate to use them in those situations. So there's quite a contrast between our experience, for example, in the UK and in the countries where we've been doing the research with partners. So we'll be talking about the international partners we've worked with and the various settings. So just moving on to my next slide, and sometimes they get stuck a little bit. Here we go. So the projects that we'll be talking about today focus on equality of opportunity to access and use digital technology in education. But we are particularly focusing on mobile technologies. So smartphones and tablets are the technologies that are typically used in the settings we're referring to. And our focus is on generally on low-income countries, or perhaps sometimes middle income. We're interested in conventional classroom teaching and learning, but also the learning that takes place increasingly in other spaces, out of class. It might be immediately out of class, for example, in a computer lab within the school, but also in places such as an internet cafe where learners go and use Wi-Fi to access resources, learning outdoors with the use of mobile technologies in their homes, if that is a possibility, often in a neighbor's home where there's internet connection, if that is not available in their own home, and more generally in online and mobile platforms. And we're interested in teacher professional development. So how can teaching and learning be improved through TPD? So our focus is on various populations that are deemed to be marginalised in various respects, or have, let's say, limited access to resources, who are in more challenging circumstances, such as displaced people and migrants. The marginalised communities we have been focusing on include people who are from ethnic minorities and therefore not always in a position to fully participate in education, for various reasons, reasons of language, reasons of limited access to technology, and also, of course, discrimination that often takes place in those situations. And also hard to reach populations, by which I mean that they are perhaps hard to engage in research, and also they may be in rural rural districts that are physically hard to reach, both for teachers and learners and for researchers to be able to conduct research. So some of the research we've been doing is quite challenging, to be honest, and very worthwhile, but not always as easy as one would like. And we focus on the teachers and learners' motivations to use technology, their direct experiences, so their accounts of their experiences, and the practices that we can hear them talk about or that we can observe, and how those practices are changing. So always looking to what's the future of learning with technology. And as we do that, we draw on a very rich literature from to examine the phenomena from different angles. And here I've just picked out a few important aspects. First of all, of course, understanding the contexts in which the technology is being used. And here the role of our local partners is paramount in giving us insights into existing practices and policies, and also what happens in reality on the ground, because often there are policies that are in existence but not necessarily being followed. And also, how can we change policy? You know, what is feasible if it needs to be changed? The second item here is, of course, technology, which is our focus for today. And as we know, mobile technologies have opened up the world of digital education to so many people that previously were excluded from that whole universe. But it's not straightforward, is it? Because technology is expensive, you have to be connected, you have to, in many cases, be proficient in English to be able to use it. Then we come to methods, and here what's important to us is to respect the voices of our research participants, to give them a voice, to make sure that they are listened to through, for example, through raising awareness among teachers and policymakers. So we choose our methods carefully. And last but not least, we reflect on knowledge in our research. We reflect on what knowledge the teachers and learners need in order to be able to make good use of digital technology. We reflect on what knowledge they have already that is different from our knowledge. And we generally reflect on what knowledge is produced in the research projects and how it may be shared effectively, how it may be disseminated and shared. So that's just a few, those are just a few literature pointers there to set the scene. So I'm going to hand over now to Kula, who will present the first tranche of our research in this area.
Thanks very much, Agnes. And I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
And I hope you can see this.
Yes, we can see all the slides. That's great. Great.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you today and really celebrate Open Education Week. So I'm Kula Haridonos. As Denise has said, I'm based at the Open University, and I'm bringing with me a very strong interest in refugee education. and how we can make our universities more welcoming spaces for refugees. So this is really the focus of what I'm going to present today. And I'm going to start with a question that is of great concern to me. And it's really because displaced communities are in situations where, as Agnes said, they are coming from the margins. They have been invisible. Their knowledge has not been valued, and really, a question for us is really how we can work towards addressing these injustices, these epistemic injustices in our work with displaced communities. And in my talk, I'm hoping to highlight some of the persistent issues in research in the field of forced migration, which is around ethics and politics of knowledge production. And what has been very commonly used in this field is extractive methods, as we said, where we are doing research on and about refugees, but not with refugees. So today, I'm also hoping we can have a discussion about the values, the principles, and ethics of undertaking research with marginalized populations like refugees. Now, you may be familiar or you may not be familiar with the wider refugee context, even though I'm sure that you have seen lots of visuals in newspapers and social media. So just to give some figures, at the end of 2022, 108 million people have been displaced around the world. And of these, the recent statistics by UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, is that only 7% of those refugees access higher education. So there are many reasons why this is happening. Among them is, of course, lack of scholarship opportunities, lack of recognition of prior learning, restrictive policies in host countries. Not many pathways are there for refugees to actually enter higher education. And we know from work in this area that there is a great need around good quality English language programs. The needs are high. English language skills are a significant barrier really in accessing higher education. And for many refugee learners, for many displaced learners, English seems to be the language of opportunities and connection because they aspire to resettle, they aspire to seek asylum in other countries, they aspire to continue studies or really look for employability. So the study I'm presenting really focuses on English language teachers. It marks an attempt, really. It's a small study. It was an exploratory study that really, it's about taking some steps towards engaging with this question that I presented in the previous slide. And it was a study that looked more at the context, really before developing any major intervention to support teachers with the use of technology. And just to say that the study was happening at the time of COVID, so most of the interactions we had with the teachers were all digitally mediated. It happened over 2 phases, as you can see on the slide, and the focus country was Jordan. And this was work in partnership with Mosaic Education, which offers English language programs in Jordan and Lebanon, but also Centrality, which again works with Mosaic Education in those countries. So in this project, we used an approach which is called participatory ethnographic evaluation and research. It is carried out by peer researchers who are members of the target community, in this case, English language teachers in tertiary and higher education. It offers a potential to really gain a greater understanding, a richer understanding and insights as participants share their experiences with a trusted peer. And this leads to an improved understanding of teaching and learning in refugee context. It is participatory, it is qualitative, it really generates lots of stories and narratives and views from those teachers who are in those contexts. And it allows peer researchers to do interviews with the members of their own social and professional networks in this case. So it leads to highly detailed and context-specific information to be generated. And what appealed to me, especially in this approach, is that it really enables it. One of the principles is that participants and the peer researchers are really included in various stages of research, which was, as I said, something that really appealed to me, because sometimes we engage in participatory work very early in our research projects, but we are not we're not engaging with our participants when we are writing or where we're disseminating or analyzing the data. So in practice, this meant that we recruited English language teachers. We had 5 in the first phase and 6 in the second phase to act as local researchers. Each of them interviewed peers whom they selected from their professional networks. They took part in orientation meetings, in training workshops, including data analysis workshops. We co-designed an interview protocol and really selected themes that they were of interest to them to do this study on. They conducted the interviews. They took part in many debrief meetings with a dedicated member of the project team where the data was reported and offered lots of insights about their experience. And they also took part in interviews with one of the researchers. And as I said, they took part in the analysis of the data. We had workshops where we were looking at the data specifically, really looking at them at themes that were emerging, and peer researchers offering very rich insights about in this case, it was about the impact of COVID on teaching and learning. It was about approaches that they used in the English language classroom, but also professional development. And as I said, the impact, a strong focus of this study was about the impact that COVID had on their practices as teachers. And they selected this topic to really to examine as part of this study. And I wanted to share with you short extracts of 3 vignettes that we created through analysis of interviews that our peer researchers did with a peer. And these vignettes, as others, have been published in a paper that I have included the reference here. So the first one is related to Bushra, who is a very experienced teacher. She's teaching for 30 years, and her university was part of a project that actually was led by a London university to assist young refugees in developing study skills and accessing higher education. So as you can see here, COVID-19, of course, had profound implications for educators' lives, work, and knowledge practices. So Bushra highlights dependencies on devices, but also absence of devices. Technology was present in material terms. I mean, you couldn't really do much without technology, but there was also this widespread notion of digital poverty, an absence of infrastructure, an absence of skills as well to engage with that. So she gave an example, as you can see here, where a student didn't have a laptop and didn't have the machines, devices, and they had to walk 40 minutes to his uncle's house to participate in a session. And devices really took on particular importance in these situations, but also in this interview, lots of issues around infrastructure and connectivity were also highlighted. The second one that I'm sharing with you is related to Omar. Omar is a less experienced teacher with a few years only in the profession. He was a refugee himself, a Sudanese teacher in Amman. And he highlighted the novelty of this situation they found themselves in, as you can imagine. And he also highlighted that it was a stressful situation, found online teaching quite challenging to manage, but also manage expectations and realized that actually participation would take a different form in those spaces. He also talked about managing intrusiveness of technology, students not using cameras to protect their privacy, but also being mindful that they were in an environment with really sharing the space with other members of their family, not being able to speak loudly, or not being able to participate in the sessions at all and missing sessions because of those situations. The teacher also felt that the background noise in the student's home was disruptive for him. And the final example I would like to show is related to Hira, which is a Jordanian teacher teaching in after-school clubs and community settings. And she was actually a teacher in public education system in Jordan. So she highlighted all these material limitations, material constraints in the environment. There is no equipment, there were no materials, even before the pandemic, and relying on her to buy things or using her own personal devices. She made this powerful statement that then dealt with this situation very randomly. And her narrative also highlights that teachers had to navigate personal challenges in terms of their emotions and additional workload that they had to do, as evident in this vignette. And she really felt very uneasy with this lack of like very blurred boundaries between work and home, and really working prolonged hours. And this also included like this notion of really struggling with work time, intruding on her private time when students were submitting assignments at any time of the day. So I'm finishing by repeating this question really that I started with in my first slide. And I'm adding technology here. What does it mean to conduct research with technology in forcibly displaced communities? And we know that teachers in refugee settings were already in an environment with significant barriers and systemic disadvantages. These barriers were really exacerbated by the additional disadvantages that the pandemic really brought upon. And it became clear through our study that aspects of digital inequality were entangled with other aspects of long-standing forms of inequality these specific communities are facing with. In the paper, we call this an amplified disadvantage for these communities. And with this in mind, I would say that the study was really a helpful reminder for us that we need to consider very carefully how technology is really entangled within these wider socio-technical networks that may generate or may actually make things worse when it comes to disadvantages. And I'm noting here a quote by Jeremy Knox at the University of Oxford, which raises an important point. And he writes that to be on the worst end of the digital divide does not mean that you live an entirely analog life, unaffected by the encroachments of digitization. Rather, it means that you have less agency in the digital era. So in the case of the teachers that, and what we have seen in our studies is not that they didn't have access to devices or gadgets. They, as others, had access and had to use Zoom and had to use Teams and had access to devices, but with constraints, as we have seen. The main issue is that they are invisible and they don't really have voice on issues affecting their professional life. They don't have a say in developments of technology, and they are not in a position to influence any of these developments at the moment. So it is really about placing attention to human technology relations in those contexts, and really be very attentive to how a technology is embedded and is influencing and is really responding to this wider social, material, political environments. And for us in this field, is really about creating opportunities for people to be able to influence and change these systems, and thinking how this technology that we're introducing in these environments actually can help shift power dynamics in those settings, because it's really about fostering different power dynamics and really thinking of how technology can shape opportunities and life trajectories in those environments that are where really structural and systemic inequalities are in abundance. And I'm going to finish here. Thank you very much for listening. And I would like to thank the collaborators and our peer researchers in this project. My huge thanks goes to them. And since we're in the Open Education Week, I would like to really encourage you to visit the Sanctuary Hub that we have created on the Open Learning platform, which includes curated resources for refugees and other people in the asylum system. Thanks very much. And I think I will pass it over to Saraswati.
Thanks a lot. It's my great pleasure to be here with you all. So in this presentation, I'm talking about our project that explores how mathematics teacher educators from marginalized communities in Bangladesh use mobile technology for their professional development. You may have noticed that at present, most countries, including the least developed countries, have done very well with school enrollment. But research shows that almost half of all children worldwide leave primary school without strong foundation skills. And if we look at the data, those students who don't have strong foundation skills are usually from lower income households, communities, and countries most affected. So there is a kind of learning crisis and the World Bank calls this learning poverty. However, we have seen that learning poverty focuses on literacy, but there is a gap in research on numeracy. But no matter whether, if we want to address the issues of literacy or numeracy, there is a great role of classroom teachers. So it is really important for us to ensure that classroom teachers have professional development opportunities, because those professional development opportunities may have direct impact on students' learning. And we have seen that there is a growing use of technology for professional development, and all mobile technology has been used in teacher education these days. But there are again gaps in research on how teachers are using technology for their professional development and what could be the impact of the use of technology on teaching and learning. We have seen very little research that explores teachers from marginalized communities, how they are using technology for their professional development and what can be done to support those teachers that are working in marginalized communities. That's why our project, we call this 3 Empower project. So this project explores how teachers, especially those serving marginalized rural communities, can access the mobile CPT program, that means community professional development program. And then what issues are around their access? Are there any issues, any inclusion issues in terms of their access to professional learning? So we have used participatory ethnographic evaluation research, peer approach in this project. So to collect data, so which means teachers' stories were collected and interpreted by other teachers who belonged to their own community and who had similar experiences. So in our study, we have collected data from marginalized communities from different upazilas, from different sub-districts in Bangladesh. And a total of 40 primary school teachers have taken part as a peer researcher, and each of them has collected 5 stories from 5 different teachers who are either from their own school or teachers from other schools in their locality. So how it works is that each teacher collects stories from 5 other teachers, and that teacher takes part in an interview. So we also have 5 early career researchers. So first, the peer researchers, those teachers teaching in primary level, they collect stories from other teachers, and then they take part in an interview with early career researchers. So the interview focuses on the stories that they have collected. Then peer researcher and our early career researchers, they sit together and they do some sort of thematic analysis to understand the stories better. But this is, you can imagine that this is a challenging job. So that's why we had to train those school teachers, because they didn't have any prior experience of doing any kind of research. So we had to bring them on board. That's why we organized a co-design workshop with them to help them understand what they are going to do, what could be their roles and responsibilities, what could be ethical issues in doing the research. So we trained them before they went to the field. And then with the help of the emerging findings, we also realized that it is really important for the stakeholders to understand, to have a shared understanding of the issues. So what we did was we organized Evidence Cafe, and we brought all the stakeholders, key stakeholders together, and with an aim of developing our understandings, shared understandings. And then we have collected data in 2 different cycles. So I just wanted to talk about the theory of change for us. So our theory of change, it looks like, we have a kind of understanding that if teachers have access to mobile technology, that can have a direct impact on student learning. So, but when I'm saying this right now, it may not make sense to you, but so could you click the next one? So our point is that if teachers have access to mobile technology, they can get access to content for their learning, I mean, professional learning. And then when they have access to content, next click, please. Maybe you could click on all. And then when they have access to the content, I mean, professional learning, then there might be an issue. Then if they have access to content, then is that relevant? Is that relevant to their job role? So we understand that the content should be relevant to their job role. And also only getting access to relevant content is not enough. Only teachers learning is not enough. They should also try to bring change in their classroom practices. But in order to be able to bring changes in their classroom practices, teachers need support from their school leadership, or from their colleagues. So until and unless they have support from their school community, they cannot transfer their new knowledge into their classroom. But we believe that if they have access to relevant content, and then if they have support from their school community, they can improve their teaching and learning practices, and that can have direct impact on student learning. However, our project is very complex. You can see, we have 4 different strands, and then we have collected data from multiple sources in multiple phases. And here I am talking about the very first part, a tiny part of our project, that is study 1A, equity of access. By the way, Agnes was leading this strand. And then we here in this presentation, I am simply focusing on whether teachers have equitable access to professional learning in the context of Bangladesh. Next slide, please, Agnes. Maybe you could just, findings slide now. Yeah, we have very interesting findings, but I have listed just five findings here. So the first finding is that access to online learning is not a major barrier for most teachers, although they are working in marginalized communities. We don't think that access to online learning is a major barrier. Almost because we found that almost all teachers have access to smartphones, and some also have access to other devices like laptop. And actually many teachers talked about using a wide range of online apps and platforms to maintain their professional knowledge and networks. But I don't mean that teachers didn't have any issue with the access. Of course, some teachers, very few teachers, they had issues, like those teachers who were working in a very hilly region. They didn't have access to the network, so to the internet. So they had to depend on mobile data to access the internet. There were a few issues, but that was not a major barrier. That's my point here. And also, so teachers had very good access. I mean, in a way, at least they had access to smartphones, and they were using different platforms, different apps for their professional learning. However, the teachers who were motivated to use technology for their professional learning, they simply talk about their aspirations to improve their own knowledge and skills, and to teaching and learning more, to make teaching and learning more enjoyable. So what I mean here is that teachers were not motivated by concerns about numeracy, but they had a general desire to improve their own learning, and maybe to improve student learning in general, but not to improve numeracy learning of their young students. And none of the teachers spoke about being motivated by concerns about mathematics skills or numeracy of their students. We have also observed some, issues around inclusion. So I mean around equitable access to technology for professional development. We found that most female teachers have less access to laptops and other devices at home, particularly at home, because those devices usually belong to their husband or their partner, and they get an opportunity to use those devices only when their husband or partner is not using the devices. So this means, what we mean here is that social and cultural values or maybe gender stereotypes in those marginalized communities seem to hinder female teachers' professional development opportunities. Additionally, our understanding is that there is inequitable access to time for professional development in those communities, mainly for female teachers, because they lack time for their professional development because of their household responsibilities. So in comparison to male teachers, they had less time. Similarly, there are several indications that teachers have inequitable access of understanding of the nature and purpose of professional development programs that they have participated in, and also the role of technology. So we found that for some teachers, it seems as if when they complete their course, their professional, like we have found that they have participated in a professional development course that is designed by the Ministry of Education. And many teachers, they have completed, many teachers have completed the course, but for some teachers, it seems as if they have a kind of impression that once they complete the course, their job is done. They don't think that they are taking the course to bring changes in their classroom practices. So although they have completed the course, many teachers, they have not used the activities from the course in their classroom practices. And also we found that some teachers who have not tried to use the activities from that course in their classroom practices, they also claim that they are not using the activities in the classrooms because they don't have good access to technology at school. However, when we went through the course, we understand that the Ministry of Education has designed the professional development, that program, with an aim of bringing changes in classroom practices, even where there is no technology. So teachers don't need any technology to apply their knowledge or to use the activity. Actually, the program is an activity-based program. So there are direct examples which teachers can easily take that into the classroom. So this means teachers, maybe they have they are unable to understand the main purpose of doing the course. So for them, it seems like they are doing the course just for their academic promotion or something like that. So we found these kind of examples. However, it doesn't mean that teachers have not used that. We have found several examples from some teachers, and then we found that the teachers who have used those examples in the classrooms, they believe that those activities have helped their children, their students in learning. Students have got an opportunity to learn math in a joyful environment. And then that also has helped their students to get, to get rid of the kind of fear that is mathematics phobia. So they are talking about that, but many teachers, unfortunately, many teachers have not used those activities in the classroom. That's why what we have been doing is that we have been trying our best to reach out to key stakeholders in the country. We have been organizing several stakeholder engagement events. We have brought together school heads, school head teachers, policymakers, and Like just today, we organized an event which brought together teachers, head teachers, policymakers, training manual designers. So they were all together, and then they were listening to each other. So now I'm speaking from Dhaka. So we've been running several, stakeholder engagement events because we really want to have a positive impact of our research on the research communities. I think that's all. And then if you have any queries, please do contact us. I'm sorry, Tom Power, who is leading the project, could not make it because of his other commitments. So thank you so much, all of you, for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Saraswati. Let me just open up my slides now, and I'm going to be talking about the final project, which we completed last year, but we're still doing presentations and publishing out of it. And let me just get that started. So this project is called Reaching Out to Marginalised Populations in Under-Resourced Countries, or REMALIC for short, where the LIC part of it stands for low-income countries. Saraswati and myself have been involved in this project, but also many other people, which whom I will mention in due course. And I should say that the project is supported by the British Council. So today we're talking about marginalised populations and their use of digital technology, and thinking about why we decided to reach out to these populations. As you can see on this slide, we worked with marginalised populations in Sudan and Senegal in Africa, and Bangladesh and Nepal in in Asia. So those were the 4 target countries for the research. And the underlying rationale here is that use of digital technology is deemed to have largely a positive impact on how students can learn and teachers can achieve pedagogical change. And that should be the case for those contexts like any other. However, as we have heard from other settings with similar challenges, there is often limited access to technologies or unequal access to technologies due to limited resources. And we also found through our literature reviews that there was very little research on marginalised children's and their teachers' and parents' experiences of using technology in the context of student learning. So our project set out to address this, and we collected lived experiences of people in those 4 countries, with a particular focus on children aged 13 to 15 and their teachers and parents. And as with other projects, we are aiming to draw out policy, pedagogical and research implications for how technology is utilized in those kinds of settings. Now, this project actually also looked at the role of English in those settings, but we don't report on that here due to time constraints and our focus on technology. So let me just tell you about the research team. So I was the lead of this project. Saraswati and Mark were on the team in the Open University. We also worked with a colleague in Australia who was a policy and English education expert. And then key to this project were the national partners in the 4 countries. They each led the fieldwork. They had their own research team in each case, and they selected and worked with local schools. and with other stakeholders in their countries to lead the impact activities. So quite a complex project, much like the previous one that's been talked about, where we had an international collaboration and a whole network of people that who had to work closely to make things happen. And here were the research questions that we were guided to in relation to the use of technology. So the first one was about access. Access that they had to technology for educational purposes. The second question is about attitudes. So teachers, students and parents' attitudes. And then the third question is around experiences in using technology for student learning. So these are the three aspects we explored in the project. So here's something about the data collection. This was qualitative research conducted through focus group discussions, interviews and classroom observations. And in each country, 4 schools were involved, 2 in rural locations and 2 in urban locations. And in each school, there were 10 students involved, 4 parents and 2 teachers. So this is how the research was organized, and it was the local partners who selected the teachers, the parents and the students. So now we're just going to share briefly some of our findings. First of all, experiences of using technology in schools. And I think these pictures that were taken by our partners show the reality on the ground. And here we have some quotes from teachers and students. So they talk about their use of technology occasionally. So for example, the first quote is from an English language teacher saying that they were using technology to teach, search for and teach vocabulary items, teaching the students how to search new words, and using a mobile device for that. The second quote from the teacher from Sudan talks about using the mobile phone to prepare lessons, making a lesson plan, but not using it inside the classroom. Now, the students often told us that there was a computer lab in their school, but that they didn't tend to use it. Sometimes they would use it, but of course it was out of action during the time of the pandemic because of the mobility constraints that we all experienced. So limited use before the pandemic and no use at all during the pandemic. So kind of quite a mixed picture of some use in schools, but quite limited. And it seems that there's a contrast with experiences of using technology at home, which is more varied, possibly more extensive, although our qualitative research doesn't quite allow us to establish that in quantitative terms. But these students talked about using mobile phones for their home assignments, for generally improving their learning, doing Google searches, using YouTube, downloading apps, and accessing online classes from home. They also talked about informal uses of resources such as songs, music, and resources that they found on social media. And of course, they shared their challenges in terms of having to share technology with their siblings or with their parents, and having limited connectivity to the internet. The parents also sometimes mentioned that they saw students working together through their mobile devices. So here's one that's talked about how the students are using WhatsApp groups through which they carry out work together. I noticed that. So a collaborative use of technology that was not mentioned in the school setting. So this slide summarizes some of the challenges in technology access and use, very much echoing what we've heard already in this session about problems with connectivity, costs of using technology, having to share, and also a low proficiency in English and low digital literacy skills. So the quotes here support some of those challenges. You can see they're drawing on the various countries. And then also we noticed some gender differences being remarked upon. And here's a variety of experiences being reported. For example, someone in Bangladesh saying that boys get the phone, but girls are deprived. Or we don't allow girls to share technology with us. On the other hand, some parents saying that the environment has changed. Prevailing discrimination has been eliminated. My son and daughter are both equal. And then the teachers remarking that in the case of girls, guardians don't want them to use mobile phones because mobile phones may have negative contents, while the boys do use the phones. And then someone remarking that the girls are more interested in new technology, they have more opportunities. So really, it can be hard to make sense of the data because there's quite a mix of opinions and also observations about access to technology from a gender perspective. So that brings me to the end of the presentation about Remelik. We published a paper that gives a great deal of detail that you can access. And we also have the project blog where there's a lot of information that was posted by each of our partners about their local context. So I think it's very interesting to read. Okay, so that brings me to the end of that. And I guess I hand back to Denise now.
Well, a big thank you to our speakers. And I think we should show our normal way of thanking our speakers before we move into questions. So let's thank our speakers with a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to open the floor now to everyone. I can't see any questions in the chat as yet, but
Sorry, Dennis. There is a question on question answer.
In the Q&A channel.
In the Q&A chat.
Q&A,
yeah,
if you Q&A chat, if you go there.
Sorry, I'm in the wrong piece. Right. So we've got a question for Saraswati from Simul Urasami. Is it, according to you, technology-supported learning and teaching can support reduction leaving primary school from poor and low-income children? So basically, if you use EdTech, will children stay on? Will it stop them leaving primary school education?
I think it's a difficult question. Actually, we have not explored that area. But to my understanding, like we have done another project like EACEA has just presented. We have worked with teachers and students from 4 different countries because in that project, we were directly working with school level children and parents, and also including teachers. So based on my experience from that project, I would say that somehow, yes, that may help, to and that may help students. Like we found that even in rural communities, particularly in Kathmandu, they were from a very marginalized communities living in the suburbs of Kathmandu. And then we saw a clear gap, between teachers' understandings and students' understandings or students' interest. Teachers had a kind of impression, now I remember, like teachers had a kind of impression that students don't have any access to technology because they are very marginalized communities, very poor communities. And then, but we found several examples that, they are super smart and they are tech savvy. And we found very interesting examples, like in that marginalized communities, what happens is like in that whole village, one of the students has access to a smartphone. Then what he does is that he invites his friends, and then they sit together to watch English movies, to learn English vocabulary. So they are carrying out group work, and many of them they have reported us that they learn very well when their teachers use technology in the classroom. And they have also informed us that they can't enjoy the class when teachers are not using technology. So, and then also they have reported that they can learn very easily when teachers use technology in the classroom. So like they are using technology, like they are watching English movies to improve their English. It's really amazing. We have amazing examples from those marginalized children actually in that project. So based on that learning, I would say yes, to some extent it may be helpful.
Thank you, Saraswati. Nalin, I'm going to click the answer live. I wonder if you'd want to ask your question. Okay, let's mention her question. Sorry you can't talk to us. She says in one of her research projects, she's found, as you say, Saraswati, there is a high need of teacher education with technology, and this is not always successfully done. Can you comment on that?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
Nalin Gamaj is telling us about some of her work, which she found, her finding is similar to what you found. There is a great need for teacher education about technology, which isn't always successfully carried out. Would you like to comment on that?
Denise, I'm sorry to interrupt. Nalin actually put a comment on the chat box saying whether she can speak.
Yeah, that would be great, actually.
Yeah, maybe she can ask the question.
Yeah, of course. And I've opened the the chat.
Nalin, are you able to?
Am I audible to you?
Yeah.
Oh, here she is. Nalin,
Okay.
over to you.
Okay. So actually, I have done several research during the COVID time regarding kind of a similar aspect. And I'm happy that Prof. Zagnes was there once when I was doing the project, and she helped me. And the thing is, I just want to know, what about the mobile access rate, the speed of the mobile network, especially in these area that you have researched, Senegal, Bangladesh, when they have the synchronous session, online session, because in some of our research, we were not able to do some synchronous sessions. Therefore, we have to have a recorded session. One of the problem we had was our network stations were busy and they could not even access the online session. So what we had done was we had some recorded session where the student can access those sessions when the network is not busy. What about your encounter in this research?
I think that's such a common issue, isn't it? For example, in the 3 Empower project, the teacher professional development does not rely on synchronous interactions. It's very much about accessing materials that have been pre-prepared, video materials, for example, watching and doing some activities, but not in a synchronous manner. And I think that is certainly a constraint that's very, very common. I don't know if Kula or Saraswati want to add to that, their own reflections on synchronous education in these challenged contexts.
I think it's similar to what you said, Agnes. So I would just reiterate what you have said just now.
Yes, same here, actually. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I have other question if you have time. That you were talking about the teacher education, about especially for me in Sri Lanka, it was a new concept, this online until the COVID came up. Most of the time the teacher education was kind of a one-day session. So they were told about all the things and they have no idea what is Zoom, what is Teams and anything. And some have no idea about the technology. And they were kind of done a session in a rush and they were asked to carry on.
Yeah, such a cliched scenario really of just a session being delivered to teachers, too much information all at once, not enough opportunity to practice, to ask questions, to apply what they're learning to their classroom practices. So I think, unfortunately, that's just such an old-fashioned approach and something that needs to be needs to change. But I think that we have seen good practices too. Maybe Saraswati, Kula, you'd like to mention some of the good work that's been done in terms of teacher development.
Yes, here in Bangladesh, Agnes, the same 3 Empower project. Here we have seen, maybe somehow we can say that they have somehow better practice. Like they have their online course. They have designed this online course for primary level mathematics teachers. And then they also have a 6-day face-to-face training for the teachers. And I visited a few schools here nearby Dhaka. I found that teachers have done both the courses online plus face-to-face. Face-to-face is also run for 6 days. So the teacher, a few teachers, they were sharing their experience with us. Like they were telling us that first they attended online courses, the online course, and then they went for the face-to-face event. Then it was really helpful for them because from the online course, they had, gained some knowledge about how they can, use new techniques to support students in the classroom. And then when they attended face-to-face program, they could have a discussion with other teachers who have similar issues, and they could get feedback from, the trainer there. So I think it's somehow, and then, but what was their major comment was that is again not enough for them. They need a follow-up support. So in a way, they were telling us that like, that is fine, online training plus face-to-face training, it's excellent, but that is not enough. We need additional support. So there should be a kind of provision for classroom observation, and then feedback us time and again. So that was the major comment. Yeah. Anyway, somehow better practice, I would say.
Yeah, actually, later on, I did a small survey on the teachers, whether they like to use MOOCs to enhance their knowledge on those things, and that got a good feedback. Unfortunately, then the COVID was over, then they start the normal classroom work, and now it's kind of a challenge for them to for us to persuade them to have those sessions, because they are busy with the general face-to-face classroom sessions, and they have most of them have, I think, forgotten about this thing. And now it's not easy to persuade them to come and join this kind of thing.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Interesting discussion. I have a question now from Teresa McKinnon. She wants me to read it out. And then we have Alicia, who will actually will speak out her own question. So from Teresa, she's saying, did you come across, are you aware of the need to support critical choices when looking online? And in brackets, I think she's explaining what that means. She's put the examples of risk of fake or poor quality information.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an interesting question about the content of, let's say, teacher development courses, whether the focus is on the technology or much more broadly on pedagogy, and also developing that critical perspective on what people may find online, and that it can be questionable quality, and of course nowadays it's also the issue of fake content. Yeah, I think it's the direction in which we're moving. We're really very much beyond, you know, just a focus on technology, to a deeper understanding of what it can and cannot support. And then teachers, of course, need to develop their own understanding so that they can support the students. And often the students know more than the teachers, because they have already encountered some of the risky content and the and perhaps in some cases have a better understanding than teachers, if the teachers are not users of social media or don't have enough awareness of quality of information.
Thank you, Agnes. Anyone else want to add anything from the panel?
I have my question. I'm Alicia. Yeah, thank you for sharing so much insightful articles and research. So I have a question for Ange, and I think that I like your data collection part. And I have the you said that you have focus group discussion, classroom observation, and the interview, and also interview in I think maybe in different countries, right? So my question is, when you interview these teachers, parents, students, do you need to get institutional review boards permission? And how can you do your interview on these human subjects? Did you follow some survey approval process? How can you do that? Can you share with us your insights? Thank you.
Sure. Any kind of research of this type is subject to ethics approval or ethics clearance, as we call it. So we have an ethics board at the Open University, and we present our project plans to them, our methods, whom we will approach, how we plan to approach them, any ethical considerations. Of course, the issue with research with children is also the safeguarding procedures that need to be in place, so that all the researchers are signed up to that, and we can assure ourselves that there's proper safeguarding in place. The other aspect of working with children is the criminal record checking of researchers. So all that has to be taken into consideration. It adds to the complexity of the research, but it means that a lot of planning has to take place. And I think Saraswati mentioned that in a couple of projects we have, I think Kula mentioned this as well, we have trained researchers that we've been working with in ethical issues, and we have shared with them the principles that we follow. We've asked them about their local approach to ethics. So we have run online workshops on ethical issues, and then we have asked our partners to also organize locally some face-to-face workshops around ethics, so that those things can be thoroughly discussed before the research is undertaken.
Thank you for your sharing your idea, but I still have the following up question that means that every subject, every student you interview or parent or teacher you interview, you need to give them the consent letter, or what did you do in detailed way?
Yeah, yes. So they did all consent to being participants of the research. One issue we had was some parents being illiterate. So that does pose additional challenges in presenting the research to them. As you can imagine, not people who have never encountered research before may find it quite difficult to understand what's involved, and to actually sign a consent form as well. So we've addressed this in our project by sometimes having verbal consent, and then just recording the fact that they have given a verbal consent. Kula, maybe you want to add to that?
Just to add, Agnes, that in response to Alicia's question, that sometimes you also have to go through countries' ethical approvals. Yeah. So that was definitely the case in work that I have done in Nepal and in work that I have done in Uganda. And part of the requirements that the country review boards had in place was to also translate documents in local languages. So consent forms were interpreted in the local languages. But as you say, if people were illiterate, or sometimes it's really overwhelming to get consent forms that include so much information, actually verbal consent is accepted as a form of consent.
Yes, and I mean, I think this issue of consent is so interesting, because different universities and organizations have different forms of words. as to what constitutes consent. So, for example, at the Open University, there's quite an extensive form which requires people to read through a lot of information before they can sort of consent to it, and that is quite challenging. It's understandable why it's there, but on the other hand, it's really challenging for people to or to expect people to take all that information on board, and it can be a barrier to collecting data.
Yes. It creates concerns, I think, sometimes, instead of enabling research to happen.
Yes. Saraswati?
Yeah, hi. I'm sorry. I don't have anything to add to this one, but I just wanted to let you know that I was kicked out of the meeting, and so I was not here for 5 to 6, 7 minutes. So if you have any quick questions, I'm happy to take this now. Thank you. I'm very sorry.
Thanks, Saraswati. We were just discussing the issue of consent in these projects, you know, and it, as you know, it can be quite tricky to get people's consent. So we're just talking about that.
We're running out of time, and we have 2 questions, so I'd like to squeeze them in. Danielle, would you like to go ahead, please? And then Beragui will speak. Over to you, Danielle.
Thanks, Denise. In research on students, marginalized students and refugee students, frequently the recommendation is to use equity-based teaching so that they'll feel included. And I wonder, since you've observed issues of gender discrimination, for example, the husbands borrowing or keeping the technology away from their wives, or different sorts of treatments, have you seen students in classrooms where equity-based methods, inclusion-based methods are used? Have you seen students' attitudes change so that they treat each other with more equity and inclusion?
Can I just make a comment here? Yeah, here just yesterday, in one of the schools here nearby Dhaka, we were discussing this actually, and then we found a very good example in their classroom. Like this is a kind of the school that I visited is in a.
Oh, Saraswati, we've lost your audio.
Sorry. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So in that school, teachers were telling us that many students particularly from poor family background, they are absent during the harvesting time. And then there is a kind of learning gap, learning crisis for those students. So what teachers are doing to help those students is, students from higher grades, they are invited to the classrooms in extra time. And then those students, they are helping the absent students. I mean, whenever they have time, they are helping them to learn maths, particularly because we're focusing on maths learning. So that's how, like, using students from higher grade, I think this is a very good example to address the issue somehow around equitable access to learning.
Thank you, Saraswati. And our final question, we can just squeeze it in because we've had a great response. Beragui, would you like to ask your question now, please?
Yes, I want to ask a question about the use of AI in preparing spoken tasks through flipped classroom. In Algeria, I'm working research about this topic. Whether one of you as researchers used generative AI in developing flipped classrooms to enhance speaking with your learners. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question. It's not something that was part of the projects that we've been talking about today, but of course, generative AI has emerged relatively recently, and it does offer huge possibilities for, as you say, sort of flipped classroom or out of class learning, supplementary support to students who maybe are in very overcrowded classes, or they just don't have opportunity to speak in class. I do think that the generative AI, conversational AI tools offer those opportunities to speak with an artificial agent, to develop skills in conversation, in dialogue, in asking questions, and indeed in speaking. Increasingly, we are speaking to or with the artificial agents. So it is a huge area of growth and potential. As I say, it wasn't part of these projects, but I would dearly love to explore that further, because I think it does offer huge potential for the marginalised communities that we've been talking about.
Thank you, Agnes. And we're just in time. So I'd like to thank our speakers again for their very thoughtful presentations for this particular audience, and how it's generated a very interesting discussion